Smart and well-dressed.
And really clean.
And you're kind of prissy. Prissy?
So episode 3 for The Last of Us, I have just watched it. I know episode 4, by the time you're watching this video, may just be transmitting on the airwaves in America. So want to get my 10 cents in before everybody starts raging at my opinions about this video and about this episode. So I'll say this much. For the most part, the episode was pretty good. I can understand people who didn't like it, and I can understand those who are big supporters of it. Now, one thing I'm going to say is this. The two actors, the two best performances of the episode definitely goes to Murray Bartlett, who plays Frank, and Bill, played by the legend himself, Nick Offerman. Nick Offerman is a straight dude in real life, while Bartlett is a gay Australian actor, which I didn't know. Had to look up the information. And the reason why I bring that to your attention, because Hollywood, as you know, full of activists, and I'll be coming back to the topic of activism later on, they have to make sure that everything is cast appropriate. I'll be very interested to see if anybody has any objections about Nick Offerman playing a gay man, because that shouldn't even be up for debate or topic, but I have to mention it here because you do get some woke idiots in the internet sphere that just want to sit down and call this stuff out. So the episode is called A Long, Long Time, named after the Linda Ronstadt song, which plays at the very end, which I truly appreciated and have to download and add it to my iPod later on. Or I just forgot how great that song actually is. But rather than talking about the episode itself, I will say this much about The Last of Us as a TV show so far. It's living in the shadow of The Walking Dead, created by the great Robert Kirkman himself. That show, over 11 years, has explored many themes, of love, relationships, death and loss, all these things. So I think The Last of Us is retreading it in a different way. Neil Druckmann, this guy seems to have an obsession with course correcting work that he's given to us in video games onto the big screen. It kind of reminds me of George Lucas, how he wanted to go back and refine the old Star Wars films he made because he wasn't satisfied with the technology that we got back then. And to be honest, adding CGI to practical effects heavy films is not the same. It doesn't look that good. But according to George Lucas, he thought it was 10 times better. And the reason why I bring that Star Wars comparison up, because when you look at the first Last of Us game, and you can see I've got a pivotal scene lined up ready to go, and I will be doing that very shortly, it's full of subtlety, it's full of nuance. But Neil Druckmann, now that he's got the chance to add a bit of course correction to the narrative of Bill and Frank, when you see Bill in the video game and he's on the right hand side here of Joel, he is such a badass dude. He really is. He's brilliantly voice acted. But what we get here, I guess you can probably call it the Brokeback Mountain Part 2 for HBO. It starts off with Joel and Ellie, and I've got to say at this point, the performances of Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, the woman whose face can sink 1,000 ships with one single death stare, they're flat. There's just no nuance, no subtlety to them. When I compare Pedro Pascal to Troy Baker, who voiced Joel in the original video games, Baker just brings it on, man. Like when you see the guy interviewed and you see him acting, there's two totally different people. I used to love Troy Baker, but I think he's been radicalized by the woke, loony, crazy leftists out there in Hollywood land. It's such a shame to see great talent like that being thrown to the wayside. This episode, I think the parts of it that were very clunkily orchestrated was the part when Bill takes Frank into his home, and reluctantly at first, and then they get to know each other. And then you get the piano, that moment coming up. Frank sees his piano and he wants to play, and there's a song that goes with it, and he doesn't sing it very well. Now what happens afterwards? Frank puts his hand on Bill and says, "So, who was she? Who was the girl?" I'm just paraphrasing it. Bill turns to Frank and says, "It ain't about a girl." To which Frank says, I knew it. And they had this embrace, and that's fine. No problem with that. It's okay. But then it moves on to a bedroom scene where, how can we say, oh, I'm just going to say it as it is, man. Frank goes down on Bill. You know, you probably could have given this episode that subtitle. Did we need to see that? No, not really. I mean, we've already had the kissing scene. You don't have to show any more, Mr. Neil Druckmann. What is your obsession with pushing agenda into drama, out into the mainstream? We've already got it. It's nothing new.
That has the first kiss between two men in the show.
The way you come across in this episode, or your writing, don't forget, Druckmann co-wrote The Last of Us Part 2 with Haley Gross. And I guess that gross is probably the appropriate word to use for that game. And it is such a shame because I felt that these moments between two men in an apocalyptic world ravaged by viruses and an American government that have Hitler tendencies, not very subtle on that, are you, Neil? You know, you had to kind of spell it out for us. And towards the end of the episode, it spirals into depression and you get a little bit of glimmer of hope, but if you've played both video games, you know what's on the horizon, which kind of brings me to the topic of Abby really quickly, because you know whoever they're going to cast, which actress, or maybe trans actress, you never know where they're going to go with this one. Because in The Last of Us Part 2, you do get this moment where Abby disrobes and has a very dirty scene with Owen. And the way they've stylized her is that she hardly has any tits. So I'm betting when they cast the actress to play that, it's going to be a very divisive role. It's going to be, no one's going to like it. People are going to be scrutinizing that person from now to the end of time. They'll be scouring the internet for nude photographs. I guarantee that is going to happen. And I will say, like, on a more amusing note about this episode for me, every time I see Pedro Pascal as Joel, I keep thinking that it's Burt Reynolds. If somebody could do a deep fake of Burt Reynolds as Joel from The Last of Us, I would truly appreciate it. And so that's when I kind of get the giggles a little bit, and I'm thinking, yeah, Burt Reynolds, if this was set in the 70s, and if The Last of Us was conceived in the 70s, Burt Reynolds would have been a perfect leading man for that particular film if they turned it into a movie. So I will say this much. You know, it was the episode 3 divisive. I've definitely not seen the review bombing of it. Is it just Oscar bait or Emmy bait? Of course it is. It's going to be. Now, I'm going to conclude this video, folks, with just a brief moment from the first Last of Us game. When you know who Frank is, when you find out, as a player, you're amazed. You're like, huh, wow. But again, does Neil Druckmann understand subtlety and nuance? No, he doesn't. But somehow in 2013, he did. And I think Bruce Straley might have been a co-writer for this game. So if that is the case, then I completely understand where maybe some of the more smarter narrative choices came from.
Frank.
Who the hell's Frank?
He was my partner.
And that's it. I can't show you anymore because it gets a bit gruesome afterwards, but that is Subtlety 101.
And he's gay.
That's all I have to say. So on that one, folks, if I were you and if you were me, you better come back for the next video.
Welcome to our series on exploring your masculinity. Stand straight and tall. Truly manly men do not dance.
Oh, come on!